we're going to be discussing the Anáhuac, otherwise known as the Valley of Mexico. And we're going to be talking about a specific civilization, the Mexica, otherwise known as the Aztecs. Now, with the discussion of the Valley of Mexico or the Anáhuac, we have to talk about Mexico City, which is at the heart and center of it. What many people don't know is that Mexico City lies upon the ruins of Tenochtitlán, the city of the Mexica. I'm rather familiar with Mexico City because my grandfather is from there, and he's from Iztapalapa, which is adjacent to Coyoacán, which is famous for Frida Kahlo's house, and there are many boroughs in Mexico City and municipalities, and that it's such a large city. And I really love going there with my family. There's so much history to it. As the capital of the Aztecs, and how it was really one of the cultural centers. Well, it continues to be a cultural center of Mexico, and it's just very rich in history. Although I do believe it is excessive to try to talk about the entire Mexica history in one episode. I won't be doing that. We'll be talking today about the founding of Tenochtitlan by the Mexica, and really its establishment within Mexico in the Anáhuac.
¿Qué onda? Soy Sebastián y este podcast es Otomi. For all of my non-Spanish native speakers, this is Sebastian, and I'm a high school student in the Bay Area. I've got the facts and the opinions. Join me as we discuss topics of society, culture, identity, education, and life.
So again, our story goes back to modern-day Mexico City. Mexico City lying within we're going to refer to the Anáhuac as the Valley of Mexico, they're interchangeable, but I want to avoid confusion. So we're going to stay with the Valley of Mexico. And in the Valley of Mexico today lies Mexico City, the most populous city in North America, with 21 million inhabitants within the metropolitan area. Now, Mexico City has an extensive history of individuals who have lived there prior to the establishment of the city and what we refer to today as Mexico City. Mexico City lies upon a lake bed. Now, this is the lake bed of the Lake Texcoco. And prior to modern day, there was a lake there. It was a marshy lake, one of the 5 original lakes of the Valley of Mexico. And it is a lake that the Mexica found when they first arrived into the valley. In this lake, the Mexica built their beautiful city of Tenochtitlan, which was then destroyed by the invading Spaniards. So the Mexica were part of this ethnic group of the Chichimecas, or it's just a larger indigenous group, as the Chichimecas is how they're known. And they were searching for a new place to settle. The Aztecs or Mexica were not native to the Mexican Valley, to the Valley of Mexico. They are not. They immigrated from the north. The Mexica homeland was known as Aztlan, and that translates to the land of the herons. It is given a little bit of a legendary or mythical description, often by the Mexica, but that's where they originated from, and this is to the north of that land. Now, the earliest inhabitants of this valley were the Otomi. They arrived from the west after the destruction of Tula. Tula was one of the largest cities that had existed within that valley region prior to the arrival of the Aztecs. The basin or Valley of Mexico has been very, very valuable to different ethnic indigenous groups because it's very rich in resources, in fauna and flora. It's around 7,000 feet above sea level, so it's a mountainous region, but it has a lot of rushing streams from these mountains that create these marshy lakes, which have a lot of animals and plants, and it's just a good place to establish a civilization. So there were ruins in this basin when the Mexica arrived. These are known as the Tolans, and the Tolans were two cities. First, it was Teotihuacan, which was inhabited and functioning from 200 BCE, before Common Era, to 750 CE, Common Era. Now, in Anáhuac, this is the birthplace of the gods. That's what it means. And it was a sacred place for the Mexica, as there were legends of the origin of the world in this ancient city. Now, the next city, which the Otomias originated from, is the city of Tula, which was governed by the Toltecs from 950 Common Era to 1150 Common Era. 1150 Common Era. I don't know why it said it like that. And it was revered by the Aztecs as an exemplary state run by exemplary rulers, amazing warriors, artists, and scientists. Moctezuma. So Moctezuma was one of the Mexica rulers, one of the Aztec rulers. And he even sent Mexica men to dig up Toltec artifacts because they were so important, and they were really a significant civilization within the basin, even though when the Mexica arrived, it had basically fallen apart. So when the Mexica arrived, there were multiple different indigenous groups already there, and as I said, the Otomias were thought to be the first to arrive after the destruction of that city of Tula, which is in modern-day Hidalgo. And it was, as I just said, the capital of the Toltec Empire. And there was also a capital of the Otomi Empire there, which was, of course, after the destruction of Tula, called Xaltocan. And this is in the northern part of the valley. But indigenous groups like the Otomias lost power as the Mexica rose, won the battles and won the wars. What I think is interesting is that the Otomias were the only major indigenous group not to speak Nahuatl at the time. The Mexica emigrated from the north to the Valley of Mexico as there was a drought in northern Mexico. And for 2 centuries, this group, the Mexica, they immigrated south. They were somewhat nomads. And the Mexica carried these manuscripts known as códices that had images of their patron deity, Huitzilopochtli. And they were looking for a new land for their group, and they settled at Chapultepec, which, if you don't recall, our episode about La Virgen de Guadalupe, Chapultepec is a very important place. But El Chapultepec is where they established themselves, and they became the vassals of the rulers of Culhuacan, who were the heirs of the Toltecs, the direct heirs of the Toltecs. And the Mexica were very good diplomats, and they were able to communicate and make alliances with this specific group. But what happened was the Mexica received a daughter from the king of Culhuacan to be worshipped as a goddess. The king of Culhuacan arrived to a ceremony where he expected to find his daughter. When he arrived, he found a priest wearing his daughter's skin. And what happened is the Mexica said that Huitzilopochtli had demanded the sacrifice of the princess. So this basically led to an all-out war between Culhuacan and the Mexica. The Mexica lost, and they had to leave Chapultepec to the marshy islands of the Lake Texcoco. Remember, when the Mexica arrived, Lake Texcoco was a lake with marshes and everything. But now, after they were expulsed from Chapultepec, they had to go into the center of the lake. Now, Culhuacan, I believe, was founded off the shores of another lake, not Texcoco, but Xochimilco. But even though it was founded on Xochimilco, the Mexica ended up going to Lake Texcoco, El Lago de Texcoco. And there they were searching for a new land when the prophecy basically came true of an eagle eating a snake atop of a nopal, or a cactus, which they saw happen in the middle of the lake of Texcoco. Now, this was a prophecy of their deity again, Huitzilopochtli. And with Huitzilopochtli's seeing that there, they decided that that was where they had to establish their civilization, in the middle of the lake. Now, this did work to their advantage. Being in the middle of a lake, they were able to trade and barter with the varying kingdoms surrounding them. However, they also had geographic boundaries that protected them and allowed them to flourish without the dangers of conquest from neighboring kingdoms and neighboring or city-states. And this is where Tenochtitlan was founded. If you haven't seen images, or at least paintings, of what Tenochtitlan looked like, it was many different little islands connected with each other with canals that allowed for easy transport. I believe it's been referred to oftentimes as almost like Venice. When the Mexica arrived to their current location of Mexico City, Tenochtitlan, it was 1325. That is, in the calendar that the Mexica had, lines up with our year of 1325. This city was beautiful. It was one of the most amazing things that even Hernan Cortés, who would come to destroy it, the Spaniard, he described it as a very beautiful city. And most of the conquering Spaniards, los conquistadores, said it was a beautiful city as well. It's quite a shame that they would decide, oh, you know what, we're going to destroy this beauty and these people. There's a lot of culture. It was the most densely populated city in ancient Mesoamerican history, and it had beautiful temples that would be remodeled and repainted for their deities, and there were different rulers. Of course, I'm not going to summarize all of the history. Again, we're focusing on the founding of the city. I'll be talking about the daily life in Tenochtitlan in another episode, as well as the fall of Tenochtitlan in a future episode. But it's just relevant to assess the impact that this city really did have. And it continues to exist today, Mexico City, just in different form. And if you visit there, you can see the remains of many of the temples. I've been there. La Plaza de las Tres Culturas. They have the colonial architecture, modern architecture, and the ancient Mesoamerican architecture as well. And that's just, I think, the essence of Mexico, that those different time periods that describe the history of our country, of Mexico.